Our engineers are taught to throw away about 10 trillion times for a typical average case as much energy as they pull out of the vacuum without even knowing it in a generator and a battery. And it's pouring out down the circuit and misses the circuit. They throw all that away and only calculate the little bit that we catch in that circuit and then use. Now, when we measure the circuit, we obviously measure the energy being dissipated by the various pieces of that circuit. Well, if the energy is being thrown out of there, it had to get in there. So obviously the measurements of the circuit will match Poynting's theory because it'll match the energy that actually went in there to get dissipated. Like the country boy said, you got a pipe here, so to speak, and it's got some holes in it. If you measure all the water flowing out, that's how much water come in it. Now your whole river can be around it and missing the pipe, and you won't measure that. So we have built a whole science based on throwing away this enormous energy that is pulled out of the vacuum by every little old separation of charges, every dipole. Well, in the 50s, in the 1950s, particle physicists discovered, Wu and others discovered broken symmetry. They discovered how fundamental a process something like this dipole is, where we separate two opposite kinds of charges. And T.D. Lee, for example, looked at it for physical charges and so forth, and Lee won a Nobel Prize for it. Any dipole is a broken symmetry in the furious exchange with a vacuum. It's a broken three-dimensional symmetry. What does this mean? Cutting through all the words and getting down to country boy language. It means that nature does not insist on conserving energy in 3 dimensions. We do because we have a 3-dimensional mind. We like to think in terms of space because observation itself destroys time and what we look at is spatial. So we like to think the world is made of space, not space-time. However, nature loves to work in 4 dimensions. Her fundamental law is conservation of energy must apply in 4 dimensions. Now, you're not going to beat that one, so never think about that. But there is no law of nature that requires you to come in and say, also it must apply simultaneously in 3 dimensions. If we build some gadget that makes it apply in 3 dimensions, we apply an extra constraint on what nature will give us. Turning that around, we go around building things that insist on having this 3-dimensional exchange of energy. We got to put it in 3 dimensions for whatever we get out and lose some in the middle. So we got a terrible situation all the way. It's called entropic engineering. We always got entropy beating us to death. Never go over unity, forget it, lose a lot. We talk about, efficiencies at 30% and so forth for our power systems when we talk about burning the coal and all that stuff. But nature doesn't require you to do that. All you have to do is break a little bit of this 3 symmetry set of chains where you have tied her feet to the floor. Once you break the flow in 3 dimensions, you no longer have to conserve energy in 3 dimensions. The basic conservation of energy is an inflow from 4 dimensions, outflow in 3 dimensions. From the 4th dimension, converted and flowed out into 3. And that one is free. Giant negentropy is free. Nature will start reorganizing a goodly percentage of the whole vacuum for you, spreading at the speed of light, and will continue it as long as you leave the dipole alone. The original charges and dipoles in the original matter of the universe have been putting out energy and reorganizing the vacuum for 15 billion years. Today we're said we can't engineer negentropy when negentropy is the easiest thing in the world to engineer, whereas entropy is the hard way to do it, and that's the way we all do it. The bottom line of this is if we'll initiate the negative entropy and let it go, it's just like you punched a hole in the ground and you got a big gusher of oil. You don't have to furnish the pressure and you don't have to furnish the oil. Here it comes. And it comes out in real oil that you can use. And the common dipole in every electrical circuit pours out energy in that fashion. The problem is not how to get enormous energy from the vacuum. That problem has been totally solved. It was actually solved in 1903 had we understood it. Had we understood what Whittaker wrote. We didn't. But now we do understand it, and we do certify very rigorously with some of the AIS papers that that is for real. The problem now is how do we catch a goodly bit of this energy and use it asymmetrically. You dump it in a load, let it power that load, and not use half of it to go back over and kill the little dipole. So we set about then to build one that wasn't built that way. Yes, we have been successful. We have just built our second model. The first model produced 5 times out what we put in. We pay for switch and go. We don't put any energy into it to actually power the system. It comes right out of a permanent magnet, which is a dipole. The reason for using a permanent magnet is very simple. You can pass the flux back in a flux channel back through the permanent magnet, and those poles don't get destroyed. They are welded into the material when you magnetize it. That's not like little charges separated in electrical charges. You knock the charges out and destroy the dipole. So we can bypass one of the big problems with a permanent magnet. We don't have to destroy the dipole. That gives us one solution going in. The other is, how do we catch the energy? Well, that turned out to be fairly simple. We found a material which will separate the magnetic field from what's called a magnetic vector potential. The vector potential flows unceasingly from the magnet. It'll flow from now for the next 15 billion years. You can't slow it down, you can't change it as long as that magnet is there. So you have plenty of energy flow. The question is how to use it. So we use it by diversion. We reason that this flow will replenish. It's like a river. It's like a humongous river. If we dip some energy out of it, it'll replenish the hole we dipped out of at the speed of light. So for all practical purposes, instantly. So we can dip and dip and dip. We have to pay the switch to do that. But we can keep dipping, and the water fills as fast as we dip it. Then if we come down to another area and we let the water that was replenished still interact with something, and at the same time we dump the water that we dipped in there, we will have more energy by far than what we're paying for dipping. So we looked at it as an energy flow process, which it is, and we found a material which would do part of the dipping for us. It will separate the magnetic field from the magnetic vector potential. Yes, there is a history, a long history of Overunity systems.
What has happened to it?
For example, Nikola Tesla had one. Basically, his big magnifying transformer that he had on Long Island was such an Overunity system. The way that one apparently worked is he got the entire Earth itself in resonance. The crust of the Earth, as you go down in there, is made of highly nonlinear materials, particularly when you get down to the perovskite or whatever you call that stuff. And it will act in the bulk even, it will interact in a sort of a nonlinear optics fashion. It will do phase conjugation. And so eventually what it does is everything going on is feeding energy into the Earth starts to feed energy into that wave that he created. So he gets a lot more energy in his resonant wave fed from outside, from the environment in the interior of the Earth. And that's the way he built up a humongous wave of energy. His idea was you could then put in a tap on it anywhere else on the world and extract it free. And of course J.P. Morgan's take on that was, that's foolish, you can't put a meter on it. So that actually doomed much of Tesla's career at that point when Morgan found out that Tesla was going to produce the energy freely. Small cost here at a central location, everybody else could tap it for free. There are many ways of looking at the suppression that's occurred in this area, and certainly I do not wish to talk about it myself, but I've been a victim of quite a bit of suppression. So has any other legitimate researcher in this area. All I can do is give you my ideas and drawn from my own experiences and what I think it is and where I think it's coming from. Today, we don't have so much big kingdoms. Today, we have big economic programs, big economic countries, or basically, we have cartels. We have a whole set of cartels in an area, interlocking corporations, and behind this, we have a few people who are quite wealthy and who own most things. Now, the normal nature of the beast for very powerful empires, let's call that an empire. It's a corporate empire, a set of corporations empire, is basically a cartel. Historically, as far back as you want to go, we have had cartels. Any time we have a very powerful cartel or set of people that control a lot of things, that resists any means of changing its inflow of control and its inflow of funds and money and its power. You know, everybody's trying to be the big monkey. It's really as simple as that. And so the more powerful the agency, the more powerful the group, the more powerful the cartel, the more they will resort not only to legal means, but to extra legal means to suppress their competition. You know, this is openly known today. For example, the greatest espionage in the world is industrial espionage between one corporation and another right here in America. They're the ones that hire all the spies and the spooky equipment and everything like that, by far more than the intel agents do. So that's one thing we have. We have the giant industrial, or really cartel, economic cartels in energy. And it's not one cartel, so there are many, many groups in energy, and each of those has become very powerful in its own area, and each one does not wish to see simple little electrical taps pulling out enormous energy from the vacuum. They would much rather see you burning a lot more oil and so forth. So yes, there's in my view, there is a very active suppression effort by those kinds of folks. Part of that goes into very unique areas. They don't do it so much. It's not totally mafia type stuff. It's not like, you know, you just flat get shot. There's some of that. But one of the main ways of suppressing it is they take a deep psychological profile of an individual that they wish to suppress. What it means is they really wish to get him entangled in all kinds of difficulties he can't get out of. Now, a good trait from a human being standpoint may be a very valuable trait to somebody who wishes to manipulate you. For example, suppose you're easy to approach. That's a vulnerability. That's a serious vulnerability. So one's deep psychological profile is examined in great depth by real experts. And any way that you can be gotten to where you're naive, you don't have, who knows international finance? You can be had on a money laundering scheme easily and not even recognize that's what you're in. So any way that you do not have good knowledge, or you do not have ability, or you have a vulnerability, they call them vulnerabilities, then they arrange scenarios just like you would write a movie. In fact, they do it with computers, all computerized. And in this scenario, we write a play where this particular vulnerability is going to be exploited in the target. Now, they keep deep psychological profiles on lots of useful fellows. These are people who basically have knee-jerk reactions or something, or they're radical, or they have some kind of way they interact, which, if could be connected with you, would be in the area we wish the interaction to occur, to get you off into something else totally different from what you're doing. So the next thing you know, here, all it takes to set that up may be a phone call and stimulate the interaction to occur. And then the controllers sit back and watch the game go. It's gaming. But it's just like watching a movie scenario. One of these days, we'll probably write a book on gaming and how it's done and what kind of the main games they can use. But I can tell you they're very effective. You can get so many different games from so many different walks of life by so many charming folks who are really oily characters that you would not believe it. And those come at you en masse. And usually they bury you. They bury you off in the courts. They bury you off. They get you tricked into doing an illegal act. How would they do that if you wouldn't violate the law? Real simple. How can you be made to violate the law when you're not a criminal? Simple. Let me give you a for instance. A fellow comes in and he says, you know, we really need to get some real major financing. Every inventor's poor. Everybody's struggling. Nobody's got the money to build all these build-ups, which may cost $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a piece. So everybody's struggling for money. So he comes in and we're going to raise this, we're going to form a stock company, we're going to do all these good things. Unbeknownst to you, he goes off to the Securities Exchange Commission and several other people, Treasury Department, and he says, hey, I think I have fallen in with a den of thieves. Of course, he's the CEO now, understand? Of course, he's the guy who knows all this stuff. And I'll tell you what I'll do. If you'll give me immunity to prosecution, I'll help you catch these crooks, because they're going to do the greatest money laundering thing you ever heard of. It's going to come right out of one of these foreign countries. It's going to be scrubbed and come in here to fund this effort. It's going to be laundered dope money or something like that. You have no knowledge this is happening. And they jump at the chance. They'll give him the immunity to prosecution. That's their normal modus operandi. They want to catch some crooks, and this guy's going to help them catch some crooks. So then he goes off and sets all this up and keeps you deluded about what's happening. Now you wind up in where the thing is going to be consummated somewhere, and if you consummate it, you wind up behind bars for about 20 years wondering how you got there when you never did anything to money launder anything. He's the fellow who did it and who set it up, and he testifies against you because he's immune to prosecution. This is one of the standard games. Machiavelli is not dead, he still lives. And these are the games that are played, and it's particularly played in the systems where people are trying to build Overunity systems. It's been very effective in stopping some of them.
Do you think lethal force has been used?
Lethal force is used. I worked with an inventor, for example, the Sparky Sweet is quite well known. And he was shot at once with a silenced rifle a sniper rifle from about 300 yards. The only thing that saved his life was he was an old guy and very feeble there towards that part of his life. And he was stumbling as he coming up the steps, and he fell down. He just flat fell down on the steps, caught his foot and fell right forward. And as his head went forward, the bullet went right by where his head was. And of course, the assassin was never found. So there are many cases like that. Some are killed. I believe Marinoff, I believe to be a kill. I don't believe Marinoff jumped off a building when he was excited on the way to talk about his invention and so forth. Gave no indications of it. If I can believe the reports of the people who visited where his body lay on the pavement glowed. And there's only one weapon on earth that will kill a human body and leave where it lies on the cement. Let the cement glow under it, and that's a longitudinal wave shooter, what's called a shooter. So I believe, my personal belief, I can't prove this in the court of law, I don't intend to try, but my personal belief is that Marinoff was killed. He was probably killed by either the KGB or one of their agents from one of the other Iron Curtain countries, killed with a shooter, thrown off the building to make it look like suicide. The police probably knew about it, that's why they let the body lay so long before they moved it. They didn't want to tangle with the longitudinal waves from it. So yes, there are some rather bizarre things that have occurred to some people. As I say, I prefer not to dwell on that, try to get by as much of that as we can and try to dwell on the science. The only way we're ever going to beat all of this stuff, we have to convince the scientific community that there's real science here. Let me now review some of the implications of what I hope is just now emerging in these energy systems, where we take the energy from the vacuum, turn it into normal electromagnetic energy, and we catch it and use it to power our loads. First of all, every system we got out there has been doing this. We just didn't know it. We thought the generator powered the external circuit. It doesn't. It does not power it at all. All it does is we twist the crank on the generator, the shaft, to turn the shaft, and that forms a magnetic field inside the generator, and that energy in that magnetic field dissipates itself upon the internal charges to force the positive charges in one direction and negative charges in the other to make that dipole, and that's all the generator does. It doesn't add 1 watt to the power line. All the coal, all the oil, all the dams ever built, all the nuclear fuel rods ever consumed, never added 1 single watt to the power line. All they did was keep rebuilding the dipole that we have designed a silly circuit to destroy faster than we can power the loads. Not the way to run a railroad. So we have polluted the planet, we're killing species, we're poisoning our own lungs and our own environment. We don't have to do that. But it's a giant set of cartels, it's a giant financial set of empires, and it's going to continue this way unless we get the attention of the scientific community focused on it. What we can do is do just like we did in alternative medicine, or really like the Manhattan Project. You can order the scientific community to do it whether they wish to do it or not, and hold them accountable from the highest level to the bottom. How much money are we spending in our national laboratories on nuclear stuff? Don't we think at least about 10% of that money ought to be rooted out of there and spent on nothing but this, which might save us while the other stuff takes us down the tube? Of course we should. In fact, it ought to be more than that. The best scientists we have, the best grad students, the best postdocs ought to be turned loose on this problem, and that means funded. And that means that we do not allow scientists to slander and libel people who are trying to do research in this area. Right now, they do it wholesale, and they do it at will. Now, look at what they call me in print, for goodness sake. But the problem is the scientific community resists change, and it's doing business as usual. And my bottom line is, unless the legislative branch, together with the administration, forces them to get on this problem and solve it, they will not only fiddle while Rome burns, they will help burn it. Look what they did to cold fusion. There's real stuff in cold fusion. 600 experiments worked, for goodness sake. So the thing is, you're against the scientific community is against you, lock, stock, and barrel. And by the way, everything is a distribution curve. Get off of this horse pucky about scientists are always sweet, nice, reasonable people. That is not true. 10% of them are devils. 10% of them are angels, ought to be rewarded at the salt of the earth. But 10% of them have absolutely no ethics, absolutely playing nothing but the big monkey and power game, and absolutely your worst enemy in this area. Glorious opportunity to, in other words, the vultures, or there's a better word for it, the wolves go around looking for the rabbits, and you're the rabbit and they're the wolf. So your next thing you get into is a big wolf-rabbit game with the scientists over on that 10%. So you face all of that. Meanwhile, you've got to go to the patent office. You get to the patent office, what are you looking at? This is impossible. This is perpetual motion. You say, well, the atoms have been doing this for 15 billion years. It's not perpetual motion, but it's just long-lasting. But they call it perpetual motion, and of course there is an unwritten law that anything that's perpetual motion shall not be even proved or looked at. You can't even get a serious consideration in the patent office. I speak as one who has submitted patents in this area. I know what I'm talking about. I've defended a couple of them. So what we have is a situation where the entire structure of science, industry, the organizations of science, and the patent office are already against you. If you can't get a patent, how can you license? So it's a real neat little thing. It's the old chicken and egg situation. If I had the chickens, I could get some eggs. If I had the eggs, I could get some chickens. This situation is designed so you never get chickens and you never get eggs. So the only thing you can do is to try to put your head down and continue with that and do one other thing, communication. Fortunately, we do have the internet. Sure, it's full of a lot of bad information. It's also full of a lot of good information. You just have to discriminate. So the other thing you have to do to have any chance at all is communicate, 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 which we do to the limit that we're legally able to do and not lose our patents. If we can get the government to move, they can cut through all of that by simply issuing the order to do it. And that's what it's going to take. We're going to struggle with this other, but I'll make you a prediction. If the government doesn't move, there's a 75 to 80% chance we will fail. We certainly won't make the first quarter of 2004. And if we miss the first quarter of 2004, not just us, there are several other inventors and groups in the same area that have systems that work. We are not the Lone Ranger here at all. I want every system out there that works and is real going. We need everything we can do. But if we don't make it by the first quarter, then we may as well all go home and enjoy our families for the time we have left, because it's going to blow. It will be too little and too late. And don't come in 2006 when any fool can then see the world is fixing to blow up and say, would you guys like to try this? I'll say, no, I'm going to enjoy my family while the time I have left. You blew it back in 2000 and 2001. You decided right then to blow it. And so it's on your head. And that's will be all we can do if we don't make the schedule. Everybody wants a modern life. They want to get out of the mud and the slime and everything, and have lights and have things that are powered, and have industry and jobs and homes and schools. These are common strivings from the human heart. And to try to do that the way we're doing it will destroy the planet, and we will forcefully destroy each other. It seems to me we just ought to be wiser than that.